how these hymns came to be and why we have these hymns, because a lot of these hymns were not just somebody trying to write a poem to get some money and published, but they came through life stories, life meanings, and those types of things. And so here's one. We don't have music for it, so it'll be a cappella tonight. And so, but here's the story. In Philadelphia, during the Great Revival of 1858. Anybody remember that one? Okay, no, close. Over 5,000 gathered together to hear Reverend Dudley Ting preach. As people gathered for this noonday prayer meeting, he used this opportunity to plead earnestly for each to go now, ye that are men, and serve the Lord. It is said that over 1,000 expressed a desire to become a Christian before the end of that meeting. Just a few days later, he left his study for a moment and went out to the barn to check on a mule he had harnessed to a machine that was shelling corn. When he patted the mule on his head, his sleeve got caught in the cogs of the wheel, and his arm was frightfully torn. His injury led to complications and a painful illness which resulted in his death. As he was dying, his father asked him if he had any message for his fellow ministers in the revival. He replied, "Let us all stand up for Jesus." It was these words that inspired Dr. George Duffield Jr. to preach a memorial service for his late friend. He chose as his text Ephesians 6:14, "Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness," as a climax to the thought of the sermon he shared a hymn that he had written based on Ting's dying words. The phrase, "Ye that are men, now serve him," continues to live on today through the text of the popular hymn, stand up for Jesus." Let these words echo as our battle cry against those that may oppose the cause of Christ. And George Duffield Jr. Lived 1818 to 1888. So let's sing page 456, page 456. Stand up for Jesus. Page, it won't be up on the screen, it should be in the books here. Stand up for Jesus. Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner, it must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead, till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed. Stand up for Jesus, the trumpet call obey. For to the mighty conflict in this his glorious day, ye that are men, now serve him against unnumbered foes. Let courage rise with danger, and strength to strength oppose. On the fourth, stand up for Jesus, the strife will not be long. This day the noise of battle, the next the victor's song. To him that overcometh, a crown of life shall be. He with the King of glory shall reign eternally. I like the last chorus, the first two phrases. Stand up for Jesus. The strife will not be long. It seems like sometimes, boy, this strife that we're going through is awfully long. But it's not. This day, the noise of battle. You may hear battle, the war, the conflict. The next sound we will hear will be the victor's song, and what a day that will be. So keep on standing up for Jesus. Judges chapter 9, please. Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9. We are ending the life of Gideon. And typically speaking, in the book of Judges, once a judge dies, then the next judge appears, but not now. Judges 8 is the end of Gideon's life. Judges 9 is not the next judge. In fact, I believe there are 57 verses in Judges chapter 9, and Judges chapter 10 is when the next judge starts. And so what happens in Judges chapter 9, I'll go ahead and tell you, it ain't good. What happens in Judges chapter 9, and it's all because it's a continuation of what went on at the end of Gideon's life. Remember, we had 2 Wednesdays of having this thought that we must finish well. And although Gideon is now off the scene, he is dead, that his legacy that he left, the ending of his life has such an impact on his kids, but not for good. And so we're going to look at just at verses 1 through 6 tonight. And here is the title, or the thought is Abimelech, which is the son of Gideon, a rise to power. And not every time a rise to power happens is a good thing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And in this case, his rise to power is not good. So here's our thought as we look in these 6 verses. Power can either be a source for good or a source for evil. Power, just because someone is powerful, does not make them evil. But what happens is power can have such a stronghold on somebody that it captivates and ruins their lives, and that's become the obsession of that person. Abimelech, that we'll see here, wanted the power of the ruler of Israel, and he will stop at nothing to get just that. Galatians chapter 5, we're going to look at these few verses for a few seconds. Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 and 17, Paul says this, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." Some people have said, boy, this flesh that I have on, this temptation, boy, I'm just struggling. What's your advice? I would give you the same advice that Paul said. If you're walking in the Spirit, you won't be fulfilling the lust of the flesh. But if you are walking in the flesh, guess what? You cannot be living in the Spirit. Verse, for the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary, the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. The Spirit and the flesh are opposites, polar opposites, black and white, good and evil, as opposite as you can be, cold and hot. It is as opposite as can be. So if you are walking in the flesh, it's impossible to be walking in the Spirit. If you're walking in the Spirit, it's impossible to be walking in the flesh. You cannot walk like this with them both. There is no middle ground. It's either flesh or the Spirit. We're going to look at some thoughts in regards to this, and you will see this in Abimelech's life, and we saw it at the end of Gideon's life. At first, Gideon was not as walking in the Spirit as he should, but in the middle of his life, he is walking with God, walking in the Spirit, and then towards the end, he's walking in the flesh, and that's how he finishes his life, and that's where Abimelech picks up from. So here's a few thoughts from Galatians before we get into Judges chapter 9. Walking in the power of God is our choice. Abimelech had a choice. Even though Gideon did not leave a good example at the end of his life, Abimelech still had a choice. People come to me. I was driving a church van and picking up kids for church, and we had these two kids who I picked up all the time. I don't know how long we picked them up, almost for every service that we had, and eventually they moved away. I get this phone call years later from this number. I said, hello? Hey, it's me. I'm like, who's the me? Who are you talking about? Oh, this is, and he said his name. I'm like, whoa, it's good to hear from you, man. What's going on? He says, going great. He said, we moved from Georgia, we moved to North Carolina, and guess what? I'm like, I don't know. So we found us a church that we're going to. I was like, oh, man, that's great. But I was talking to these kids, and we had a lengthy conversations as I'm driving the van from their house to the church. And then they made this comment one time and said, how did you grow up? These two kids did not grow up in the best living conditions at all. Parents were not exactly involved. They were split, not good life, addictions in the house. I could hear yelling and screaming. It was not a good situation for the kids. I said, well, to be honest, I grew up as a pastor's kid. And they're thinking, boy, that must have been easy. Boy, doing right for you must have been easy. I said, yes, to some degree. I said, but although my life and your life is totally different, we cannot blame our circumstances and why we do what we do because of our upbringing or our surroundings. It's still our choice. Was it easier sometimes for me to make the right choice? Sure it was. Is it harder for you to make a right choice sometimes living in your situation? I said, sure it is. But it's still our personal choice. Walking in the power of God is not up to our spouse, our friend, our siblings, our church, or our friends. It's up to us to walk in the power of God. Number two, you can only walk in either the power of God or the power of the flesh. And here we will see that Abimelech, 125,000%, is walking in the flesh. Everything that he does is because of flesh. I want it, and I want it now. And I want it at any cost. He's walking in the flesh, the power of the flesh. Number three is this. Walking in the power of God, though, leads to blessings. Although it may not seem like the thing to do at the time, according to the outside surroundings, we may not see the blessings up ahead. It may seem like if I walk in my flesh, that seems better and more joyous and happy for me right now than walking in the power of God, but it's not. Walking in the power of God always leads to blessings, which means walking in the power of the flesh leads to unwanted consequences. I used to tell teenagers and kids this. Sometimes teens would say, well, you can't make me do that. You can't make me do what's right. I said, you're a smart kid. I can't. I can't. You can choose to do whatever you want. You can say yes or no. It's literally your choice. But what you can't choose are the consequences of your bad choices. Just because you choose doesn't mean you're going to like the end result How many times my wife can attest to this. I'm a creature of habit. So if I go to a restaurant, I usually order the same thing over and over again because I know I like that. And why should I want to take a chance on something else when it's my money that I'm paying for it? And in fact, we go to El Coyote over there by McDonald's. We walk in and she says, "Do you want this?" "Sure, we'll take it." Because she knows what we're going to get. Right? And so what happens is sometimes we'll go out to a restaurant and I'll say, "I want something different." And I would dare say we went through this segment of our marriage where I'm trying new things on menus, and 8 out of 10 times I hated it. I mean, this stinks, honey. Remind me never to choose that again. Remind me never to choose that again. I'm just going to my same old, right? We can choose what we think we like, but it's not always what we wanted. Abimelech chose what he thought he wanted and paid a heavy price for that. But he got some unwanted consequences in the meantime. So now let's get into verses 1 through 3. And Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren, and communed with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether it's better for you either all the sons of Jerubbaal, which are 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. And his mother's brethren spake of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem, all these words, in their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech. For they said, He is our brother. Boy, how easy it was for them to say, okay, we'll go with him. Okay. Oh, how easy it is. I'm not wanting to get into politics. Oh, how easy it is in politics to say, I'm just going to go with him. Yep, that sounds good to me. Why not? They offered this, sure. And that's where we are in the United States. We just randomly pick somebody because we happen to like them, or we pick them because we don't like the other person for some reason or another. Abimelech, who is this guy? Well, we see that he's the son of Gideon. That's the other name. Jerubbaal is his name. Abimelech, as I mentioned last week, means my father a king. Who did they ask to be king? Gideon. What did Gideon say? Nada. I can't. That's not for me. That's only for God. What did he name his son? My father, a king. Sounds kind of hypocritical there. Abimelech, one of 70 sons. My friend, that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of sons. Can you imagine saying that boys will be boys, boys will be boys, and you have 70 sons? Boy, can you imagine? 70 sons. Abimelech, not the youngest and not the oldest son as well. We know who the youngest son is. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. But we know he's also not the oldest son. Abimelech may be an only son of Gideon's concubine in Shechem. It's not that one woman gave him 70 sons. Woo, boy. He had, in his later years, multiple wives, multiple concubines. And we ended in chapter 8 with the Bible saying that Abimelech was born of his concubine in Shechem. And that's where we are now. And so I believe that he is the only son of this particular woman in Shechem. Now, Abimelech was not the clear successor to his father's place of leadership. That's why he said to his uncles and to his mother, he said, hey, here's your options. And it's, what's it called, dichotomy? When you give somebody in a debate only two options when there's really more than one, more than two, die something. You can look it up. My mind just left me. But that's one of the tactics in a debate is if I'm debating Bernie, I only give him two options and makes him think there are only two options, when really there's more than just two options. So he made them think you have two options. Either 70 guys rule over you. What a mess that would be. Can you imagine having 70 people? Oh, we do have 70 people rule over us. More than that in the United States-ish. Can you imagine how crazy that would be to get everybody on the same page? We are seeing that now. Nobody is ever on the same page. Everybody wants their opinion. Or he's saying, hey, or just pick me. After all, this is the reason why he gave. He told his uncles and his mother, after all, I am bone and flesh, which tells me that he could probably be the only one to say that to his mother at that time. He is not saying it to his other brothers or his other mothers. He's saying it to his biological mother. I am your bone and flesh. I am your flesh and blood. Not the other 69 guys. It's me. Why would you not choose me? But he is not the clear successor of his father's place of leadership. This was for two reasons why he's not. Number one, God had not established a hereditary monarchy in Israel. He has not said you're going to have a king. In fact, we don't see that until the next book, 1 Samuel, when they reject Samuel as their leader or God as their leader and tell Samuel, give us a king. And what happens? They get Saul. And what craziness that occurred as well. So it's not set up yet. It was not God's intention yet. And there were 69 other sons of Gideon who might also want to succeed their father. What if, let's say, that he is son number 2? What keeps son number 1 from saying, excuse me, who gives you the right to be king? And son 3 says, wait a minute, guys, I want to be king. Can you imagine all of that? And this is what Abimelech is seeing in his mind. That if I say this without having some people to back me up, it's just going to be a paper, rock, scissors, an arm wrestle, or a fight to the death, those type of things. Abimelech, so his plan was, he went to his uncles from his mother's side, so not Gideon, so not the patriarch side. He goes to his mother's side. And all of their family with them to convince them that he should be the next ruler. It didn't take much convincing. He didn't beg, he didn't plead. Literally, they said, okay. They go to Mount Shechem and they say, okay. There wasn't much convincing there. He reminded them that he was family. We are family. He probably sang that song all the way there and all the way back. Flesh and blood, he said. Hey, I'm one of you. I'm flesh and blood. Why would you say no to me? I am your son. I am your blood. Your blood and my blood are the same. Why would you ever say no to me? This is why I believe he may have been an only son of the Shechem concubine, because he was using that as a claim to his fame or as a claim to the kingship, claim to the throne, by saying he is the only flesh and blood of the mother in Shechem. So his uncles say, okay. His uncles convinced the man Shechem to follow Abimelech. It didn't take, again, much convincing. They said, hey, he's my nephew. He's flesh and blood. Okay, I guess it sounds good. Let me say this. Blood is not always thicker than water. You've heard that phrase before. Well, blood is thicker than water. I'm always going to side with family. Just because they are family doesn't make them right. I have taught enough to know I've had kids enough to know that just because I want to think well of my kids doesn't mean they did not do something wrong at school. I cannot tell you how many parents come to me and say, my kid would never do that. I'm like, you were not here. I saw it with my own eyes. Oh, they did. They did. They would never. Oh, yes, they did. They have you fooled. It's a shame I've had many people say to me, even if my family member, brother, sister, son, daughter, whatever, even if they were wrong, I'm still going to side with them. Like, that makes no sense. I will still love them. I will still respect them, but we should always side with truth, with what's right. Here's a huge analogy that hopefully it's way out there. Even if my son is guilty, not because the court said so, but he really is guilty of murder, I should not say, well, just get him off. He should just go free because he's my son. No, he still should go through the processes. I still love him. I still support him. I'll do all that I can for him, but there are still consequences that has to happen because of that. Just because we're feminists, it doesn't mean that we are right. Be careful. And here's the problem that happened here. Be careful when people use the relationship with you to get what they want. But I thought I was your friend. But I'm your son. But I'm your daughter. But I'm your nephew. I'm your niece. Why? I don't understand. I thought you loved me. All Abimelech did was use his relationship to get what he wanted. What I found interesting or almost comical, Abimelech did not present a resume with his leadership qualities. Hey, unks. Hey, mom. Hey, man, Shechem. Here's my resume. Here's my qualities. Here's my character. Here's what I've done and not done. Here's why I should be king. He just said, the only reason, I'm flesh and blood. What more is there? He only said he deserved it because he was family. Be careful when people use that to get what they want, or any relationship to get what they want. And it says in Judges 9 in verse number 2, speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem. The reference to the men of Shechem is literally the Baals of Shechem. The word having here its original meaning of lord or owner. So they are the dudes in Shechem. They are the what makes Shechem go round and round. They are the controllers of the city, whether it's because of finances or popularity or whatever the case may be, but they are the owners, the rulers, the lords of Shechem at that time, and how easily it was for them to say, okay, Abimelech can be king. These men, we will see, were not God-following men. Let me ask you this. Sometimes we look in the book of Judges and we see the atrocities and the evil, and we forget that they are actually still Israelites. They are still God's chosen people. These are not the heathenistic nations that they were supposed to have destroyed. These are from the lineage of those who came from Egypt, through the Red Sea, through the Jordan, around Jericho, into the Promised Land. These are those same people, not the people themselves, but of that same country, that same lineage. And now they are serving other gods. Remember back in Judges chapter 1 and chapter 2, when I said that all the book of Judges is based upon their actions in chapter 1 and chapter 2, when God said to utterly destroy and cast out all the other nations. Did they do that? No. In fact, most of them, I think 70%, did not do what they were supposed to, and they kept them. And now it's coming years later, generations later, we have Israelites who were once God-fearing people, God-worshiping people, to now worshiping Baal and acting as such. Do you know of other countries who are in that same boat? Multiple countries. England is one. America is another one. Once here, now because they allow things to come in and side with things, no longer where we once stood. Verses 4 and 5, chapter 9. So they said, sure, you can be the leader now. And they gave them 70 pieces of silver, 70. I think that's an interesting number. We'll look at that in a minute. Out of the house of Baal-berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him. Verse 5. And he went unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons upon one stone. Notwithstanding, yet Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. Wow. How did he become king? It's kind of easy when you kill off all of your other competitors. I'm going to make sure that I become king. Verses 4 and 5. The men of Shechem gave Abimelech money to help him start up his leadership. Now, a couple of things about this. I mentioned 70. How many sons are there? 70. How many pieces of silver did he get? 70, right? Could be coincidence. Could be. Do we know for sure that the men of Shechem knew what he was going to do with the money? We don't know that. It sounds like that they gave him some money. Hey, here's the money. Start up your leadership campaign or whatever. So he took that money and he hired people to do a dirty job. Now, do you think the men of Shechem, once the atrocity was done, knew what had happened? Well, sure, you would have to be blind that all of a sudden only one son's left. Who could be the killer? I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I'm pretty sure I could nail that one down pretty fast, right? But did the men of Shechem care? Nope. They will still make him king. When he should have been in prison or worse, they make him king. Interesting. Where did the money come from? The money came from the temple of Baal-berith. Is this a temple of God, yes or no? No, not at all. It's not a holy temple by any stretch of the imagination. Clark says this: a work begun under the name and influence of the devil is not likely to end to the glory of God or to the welfare of man. The work begun under the name and influence of the devil, which is what's happening here, it's not likely to end to the glory of God. Can it? Sure, if things come around and he repented. But when we start like that, if the foundation is crumbly and evil, everything built upon that tends to have the same roots as that. Therefore, Abimelech killed his brothers with the support of his relatives on his mother's side. Again, this is why I think he was the only one from that particular mother because if not, they killed their own nephew. And the mother was okay with killing her other sons, as long as that one son became king. I do believe he is the only son of that particular woman. The men of Shechem supported the plan because it was good for them, not because it was morally good or right. Be careful when we are supporting something just because it's good for us and not because it is right thing to do. That's the difference between walking in the flesh and walking in the spirit. Walking in the spirit say, hey, it's morally right, I'm going to do it. Walking in the flesh is, it's good for me, I'm going to do that. Abimelech said, what is good for me? My mother, I think I'm becoming more like her. I would come home and she would be watching reruns of a particular, it's not really a movie. Back in the day, they had these detective shows, and they're like an hour and a half long. It wasn't even a real movie, a long show pretty much. And she would watch Columbo. That was her show that she watched, and I've seen them all a dozen times as a boy. I would come in and, I know what that one is, know what that one is, and she just enjoyed this, it's not sleuth. Yeah, sleuth. I almost said sloth. I don't think it's sloth. She enjoyed that type of thing, figuring out clues on why. Now, I come home and that's what I do. I sit down and watch reruns of Columbo. And so what's interesting is that almost everybody in those shows are doing a murder only to benefit them. That's usually what happens. Why do we commit atrocities? Whether it's as bad as murder or jealousy or greed or lying or whatever it is, any kind of sin, why do we tend to commit sin? To try to help our own self out. It's never to help, hey, I'm going to sin to help you out. Most of the time, it's to get us in a better position and in a better way. Abimelech ruthlessly killed his brothers just so he can be the only living son of Gideon on that side. The only living son of Gideon, so he can be king. It will be like this. And do not say that it has happened. I'm not going to get into politics or when you believe conspiracy theories. I like them, but that's not the time for it. It will be as if a president who is going to run in the next election kills every other president who's trying to run, or candidates for presidency, in every party and every candidate that he can find, just so they're the only ones left. And it would be the same as if we still vote him in. That's nonsense. Why would you do such things? I dare say that if we as a country keep going in a direction as such, who knows where we will be one day. No doubt. Gideon would have thought, if I had come from the future, say, hey, Gideon, just to let you know, do not name your son Abimelech. Well, why? He's going to kill your other sons, all of them, just to become king, which you did not want to become king. Oh, no, that would never happen. Not in a million years would my son kill all of his brothers just to become king. Don't say I didn't warn you. There's no way he would have thought that. So the question is this. What kind of legacy did Gideon leave behind? Let's go back to the very first page of this. Don't turn there. And I said, walking in the power of God is our choice. Correct? Could Abimelech have walked in the power of God? Yes, absolutely. Even after he took the money and he's fixing to pay the money to those ruthless people, and right before he killed his brothers, he could have said, this is bad. This is bad. I'm going to stop this. I cannot do this. He still could have done that. It's still his choice. Now, let me ask you this. if Gideon had ended his life better than what he did, would it have been easier for Abimelech to make a better choice? I would dare say yes. So, how we live does not determine the choices people make, but it may help them be able to make a better choice than keeping them and making it hard for them to say yes, right? Let's say that I'm on a diet. I am not. I've had milkshakes. And let's say I go to Bob, and I say, Bob, I am now on a diet. I will not drink any milkshakes for a year. And so he's like, so the next Sunday he says, hey, Pastor, how's it going? Let's hang out. I heard you got a milkshake thing. You want to have some milkshakes together? Oh, Bob, I just said I can't. I'm on a diet. Or how about I come to the house, I drink milkshakes, and you just watch me. Really, Bob? Okay, fine. And I watch him. He's like, Are you enjoying that, Bob? Oh, yeah. It's good. And he leaves. Say, hey, Bob, let's go out and get some lunch. Oh, good. Where do you want to go? Shake and Burger. Really, Bob? Really? Let's go. I get me a hamburger, a Juicy Lucy from Shake and Burger, a water or a Coke. He gets a milkshake. Really, Bob? And as he's drinking it, he stares at me. Really, Bob? Do I still have a choice of saying no to a milkshake? Sure. Would it be easier to say no if he wasn't drinking a milkshake? Absolutely he would. If he's drinking what I'm drinking, a water or whatever, it would be a whole lot easier to say no to a milkshake. My question is this, as we're getting close to the end of the message and the end of this passage here. By how you live your life, how easy are you making it for people to follow God? How easy are you making them to want to say yes to God and no to sin? That's the legacy that we are leaving behind. Now, verse number 6 as we come to a close. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Millo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. Oh, Abimelech, you killed your brothers? That's okay. Let's be king. Again, what is started in a devil's money and devil's plan is hardly ever in the glory of God. What did that money they gave come from a godly place? No, it came from a house of Baal. It was already gotten in a way that they should not have even gotten the money. So why not just go on with the plan? It's easier to continue in sin once we start sinning. It's like you see the old cartoons, the snowball, it gets bigger and bigger and it finally rolls over the bunny rabbit or something. That's the way it is. Once we start, it's a snowball effect until it gets easier and easier to turn a blind eye. So the question is this, who is worse? Abimelech, who murdered his brothers, or the men of Shechem who approved it? Again, these are all Israelites. They were all at one time fighting for what's right, or their fathers and forefathers were. These men approved what was going on. This was an ungodly leader given to an ungodly people, who first rejected God's leadership over the nation and then embraced a cruel and brutal man. It's one thing. Once we reject God, boy, is it easy to accept things that we never thought we would. Once we reject and say no to God, what used to be atrocious to us is no longer that bad. Ironically, Abimelech's coronation in verse 6 by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem took place in the same tree where Joshua has solemnly placed a copy of the law of God, Joshua 24:26. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. The law was right there, but Israel refused to read it or to heed to it. Kind of common in our lives when the Word of God is literally right here. We have more access to the Word of God than probably any generation before us. The question is, we can read it and heed to it, or refuse to read it and not heed to it. We're going to end with this again. Power can either be a source for good or a source for evil. For Abimelech is a source of evil. May we not let power in our lives so take us over that we do not choose God and we tend to turn our backs, and what used to be the atrocious things of the world, the filthy things of the world, no longer are so filthy anymore. What happens to a pig? He plays in the mud. He looks at his, or plays in the mud, and then a dog comes who has played in the mud but not like a pig. Looks at the pig and say, "Boy, you nasty." But that dog himself is just as nasty. Because they're looking at something that they see nasty, and then that dog sees a mud puddle. And that yellow lab is now a chocolate lab because of the mud puddle. What once seemed to be nasty no longer seems as such. When we start enjoying the flesh and walking the flesh, what once seemed so despicable no longer is. We justify it, we agree with it, and then we just start living in that sin. And let's pray to God. Thank you for all you've given us. Help us now as we close. Help us to learn from Abimelech's mistake. Help us to choose you. Help us to see this world as nothing to live for and to live for you. And help us to walk in the Spirit. I love you. Just now I pray. Amen. Don't forget.